Hello. Hi guys. So this is my presentation on I guess what I'm going to be calling a blue team tool. I'm just naming it Threatsys ChatGPT solution. So this is a scalable blue team solution, aka also just a presentation on how you build your first web app for any first and second years out there who want to get a project on their resume. So let's get into it. Here's the delay. There we go. So this is the agenda. I guess I should have gotten this slide, but this is kind of the flow for today. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Ben. I'm fifth year. I completed my undergrad in computer science, and then now I'm on my cybersecurity master's. I've done 3 software engineering co-op blocks, one as a security engineer. I'm a retired varsity swimmer. I'm now like going to the gym. Recently got into golf last summer. Now I'm not very good. I love hiking. This picture on this one. Okay. Picture in the top right is Blue Lakes, Colorado, which is probably my favorite hike. It's absolutely beautiful. Then right here is the La Fortuna Forest in Costa Rica. It was a super cool trip that I went on with my friends. Also a big fan of cats, as you will see in the presentation. I was throwing this together and I realized how boring it might actually be. So I thought, how would I like the presentation to be? And there's some cats in it. So I think cats are really going up here. They're perfect. I'm a huge fan of house music, dad rock, a lot of different genres of music. So I'll talk about a little bit about my motivation for this project. First of all, job search. Didn't want to end up at McDonald's or anything. So this is also a tip for any first and second years trying to get their first co-op or looking at positions that they're interested in. So look at first of all, find job descriptions and job positions that you're interested in, and look at the basic qualifications or requirements that they're asking for, and become the candidate that they're asking for. So if they're asking for someone who's proficient in Excel, you know, I'm proficient in Excel, right? So if they're looking for somebody with experience with X, Y, and Z technology, go off, do a project in that technology. They will probably love that. I found inspiration through it's pretty much my implementation of the VirusTotal tool, which is pretty nifty as a tool. It's used in industry a lot. It's used by security professionals around the world. Basically, you can query any kind of domain or URL and see if it's reported as malicious or not. I also wanted to learn some new technologies. So Python was one of the requirements that I saw a lot in job positions I was looking at, as far as Angular, JavaScript, and I also saw Docker containerization a lot, and I had never worked with that before. And also everything else that I plan on getting to by now, but I haven't. And then lastly, job search. Didn't want to, but I have. So quick note on vibe coding. This is probably what I would call my first vibe coded project. I utilize a lot of these LLMs as far as learning the new technologies, so it's really useful in getting started, but I would say use with caution, right? I wouldn't take code from the LLM, paste it straight into my project, and then call myself a developer. Well, first of all, if you do that, you're probably going to end up with a lot of errors. It's pretty good if you have an assignment or a project and only a few hundred lines of code, but as soon as you get more complex, right, I have a backend working with a front end, working with a database, right? If you just copy and paste a whole lot of code, you're going to end up with errors and you have no idea where to start. So main thing is understand everything you're putting into the project. Don't just blindly copy paste. And then I still think it's a pretty good tool for at least entering in a new technology that you're not unfamiliar with. Otherwise, you can also look at GitHub for similar projects. If you're looking at a new technology, you don't know how to get started, look up those projects, see how they structured their code base, and then kind of go off there. That's kind of what I did for a lot of Fast API. So this is when you do my research. This is kind of the tool overview. So this is my search page. It greets you with a little message. What we want to find today. You can also look at organizations, users, and IOCs, which are kind of like my main entities of the program. Fast API, the Python server that I implemented, also has a nifty docs page. So this is all my API endpoints that you were able to query directly instead of having to use the front end to interact with it or just send a curl request. It's my architecture overview. So the user in their browser interacts with the front end interacts with my backend fast API, and that in my Cedar application, all query the database directly. So this is kind of what I put here: Angular, fast API, Postgres, all interact with each other, and Docker Compose kind of orchestrates it all. So my services are backend, front end, database. It's a nice little diagram that I put together to show the Docker Compose network, and it kind of handles all that communication in between containers there. This is the ER diagram. So depending on how old you are, you may or may not have seen one of these already. The first part of this is how I modeled my IOCs. So it's my primary IOCs table. You have ID, what type it is, value, and a whole lot of other metadata. So I tried my best to normalize out a lot of information so I wouldn't have a lot of repetition. Once you take your database class, you'll figure out what database normalization is. It's actually pretty useful. And then you have relationships like how an IOC might relate to another IOC. So you have a domain or a URL that leads to a domain, that would be a relationship. And then I also have, so some of those IOC types here, I have different like file hashes. You have MD1, MD5, SHA-1, SHA-6, SHA-512, a whole lot of different types of hashes that I was able to account for. And then I have users have a form to organizations, use all about roles, and so simple implement role-based access control into my application. So this is kind of an overview of my backend. So the fast API entry point was made that by, and then the structure that I found through looking at best practices in projects, where so models contains my ORM entities, schemas for the PyDataTech validation, services which kind of directly handle the database queries, routers which are separated from services. I'll get into that in a second. And then utils like validators for hash values and some helpers that I found to be helpful. I also implemented JSON Web Token authentication and then some centralized exception handling. So I'm controlling what error codes get returned to the user. So before working with a Python server application that I've never made before, I had no idea that you should separate out services and routers. So the routers are your actual API endpoints that you define, but that shouldn't actually interact with your database, or it can, but good design means that your services are actually doing that. So you have a dependency from your services to the API endpoints, and so your schemas, which is how you actually validate data, plays a huge part in actually validating any data that comes into your server. So that plays a huge role in actually making sure that the right data comes into your API endpoints, and you can define those with your schemas. And your models are kind of how you model your entities in the Python code. So I have tables in my database that have, different columns, and so this is how they are modeled in Python. It does all that kind of validation. So my front end, like I mentioned, is a Angular single page application with modular components. It has a login page for IOCs, a page for users, a page for organizations. And I implemented guards for role-based access control. So users who are not an admin, for example, should not be able to view all the users in the application. We also have interceptors, which handle your authentication tokens. So how you actually authenticate to the Python server, and how it handles errors, and I can show you guys that later. The services in my front end are actually what integrate with the backend APIs, so that's where I defined all the API endpoints, which gets the data from my server and database. I'm not really a front end guy, so it looks pretty bad. It took me a lot longer than I thought it would to kind of design this all, just because of Angular. I don't really like JavaScript, but I saw it in a lot of job descriptions, so that's why I had to get some experience. But if anybody has any tips, thoughts, suggestions, etc., I'd be really happy to hear about that. And then finally, just a little bit about my database and performance. So I use Postgres to user tables, role tables, organization tables, IOC tables, and then some relationship tables that kind of model like what relationships I want to have in between entities. I created a Cedar application to kind of initialize some test data. I can show you guys that later too in a demo. It just kind of handles what data I want to have in there and how that works together with foreign keys and stuff like that. And then, like I mentioned before, Docker Compose kind of orchestrates this all. I made sure to have volumes for database persistence. So each time I spin up a container, I don't want to seed the database again. If I want to seed it with initial test data one time, that'd be great, and then just initialize that volume each time for persistence. And then also Docker Compose kind of had its own networking for serverless communication, which is really nice. In containerization, as far as best practices go, I'm really not sure. I'm not the expert. I don't really know anything about security. Just kidding. And then what's the deal with environment files? I'm not sure. I read a lot of different things about it. Like takes a secret out of code, yeah, but then it says like it's also available if they are able to get access to your container. So not really sure there. If anyone else has any thoughts about that, I'd love to hear it. This is kind of what my backend container Docker file looks like. The main thing here that I made sure to add was it'll show up. Okay, yeah. So the main thing here is that I want to run this server under a different user. So I'll run through add Threatsys, add call Threatsys, and then run these commands as Threatsys. So if my container ever gets compromised, nobody's able to run as and just go wild. Front-end container. A few things to note here is that I used unprivileged execution. So it uses Nginx unprivileged base image, so it avoids execution there. Minimal logging surface, so the access logs are disabled. Error logs are directed to standard error. And then we have this single page application routing enforcement. So this try files prevents bypassing Angular routing logic, which kind of helps make sure that the user doesn't try to bypass my routing at all. And then I use an Nginx reverse proxy, which I actually got from the Docker website, which had a lot of resources for how to get started with Docker files there. So services, like I mentioned, I have Postgres, the database with persistent storage, initialization script, health check, port 5432, which is the Postgres port. My Cedar application, which seeds Postgres, runs after the database is ready. My backend API service, it depends on a healthy Postgres, so that runs on port 8000. And then my front end, which is my client application, it depends on the backend and it runs on port 8080. And then the volumes are for data persistence with Postgres. And then now we can get a demo time, which always works out really well. So let's see. So we'll go to, should be running already. This is what you're met with when you first navigate to the application. So you get a little message saying, what would you like to find today? You search for IOCs here. I'm going to go ahead and log in to show you what the dashboard might look like for an authenticated user. And for me, I'm going to be an admin, so I'll be able to see all my users here. Great, log into my dashboard. I can see 11 users. We got Tiger Woods, we got all the users in my application. That's really cool. Shout out to Bills and Tiger Woods. As far as my organization go, Buffalo Bills are really good about submitting some IOCs. Also, the Broncos are really good. Some good organizations we see up here that are customers in my app. But then what if we want to search an IOC? We can query here. So let's say like, I actually have no idea what IOCs that it used randomly. So that is a good use case for my documentation page, which I'll pull up in a second if the lag stops. So this is the Fast API documentation that I referenced earlier. Because of the JSON Web Token authentication, I do have to authorize before I'm able to use any of these endpoints. So that same login data that I used before, I'll change that. and it tells me that I have a authorization, and then this gives me the token that I need to send with my queries. So just for an example, if I want to see all the IOCs that I have in my app, I will go ahead and try it out, execute, and we see some just example IOCs here. So let's see. This looks like an IPv6 address, so I'll go ahead and copy this and see if my app comes up with it. I'm looking for this address because I think it's malicious. Oh, look, we have a hit. IPv6 address. It's got TLP level white, which is a traffic level protocol. Currently active. It was submitted by the Buffalo Bills. It was last seen October 3rd at 6:19 p.m. Which that is a totally date in the future. Nice. And we can see we can do other filtering with this app too. So we can say, I want IPs, I want domains, I want URLs, other stuff like that. You can look for some more sensitive data, which is something that actually chat suggested for that. So that was a pretty cool feature to add. We can see either say active or inactive, where the source organization came from, and maybe this date it was last seen or when it was created, which is a good amount of filtering, I think, for a tool like this. Let's see if there's like a .com domain. Yeah. So we have yang.com and flags Jenkins as malicious. That's pretty bad. That's just an example URL that my seeder came up with. Just all random there, but yeah, just kind of show you how this search works. So we have 15 IOCs according to my dashboard. You can query them all. You know, if you're a security analyst at a company, you can upload something that you noticed as a problem, and then either users in your organization will be able to see that, or if you have some kind of sharing between you and another organization. So say you're a bank and you want to share indicators of compromise with another bank, you're able to have that kind of communication there, which is, I think, a really useful thing. And that's pretty much it for my demo. So future plans, I didn't really get a lot done with this as I thought I might at this point, but that's just because school started. It's been kicking my ass. And unfortunately, I'm not addicted to the grind. I'm addicted to the overall just taking it easy. But where might I go in the future when I start up with this again? Because this is more of a proof of concept than anything. I want distributed IOC storage, so I want to utilize some NoSQL and integrate HBase for scalable IOC content storage. So the main difference between SQL and NoSQL is that NoSQL is very optimized for reads and writes, or reads and writes, whereas SQL is kind of will maintain the relationships between all your entities. But if you need that, then that's really where you can go for that. And also, so like I said, maintain some data in Postgres, but throw a lot of it into HBase. I want real-time distribution, so I want to utilize either Kafka or Redis streams for publishing new IOCs, and then utilize some WebSockets for live updates in the user interface. I want some monitoring analytics. So the elk stack is a lot. I saw that in a lot of job positions, so I really wanted to try to either put in some Elasticsearch or Grafana. Testing and scalability. So is Fast API fast? Yeah, I don't know how well it scales, but I definitely do want to test that at some point. And then as far as CI/CD goes, and deploying it, you know, right now it's just, hey, dude, check out my app at localhost 8080. That doesn't mean anything to you guys. I want to actually get this deployed and orchestrated with a good pipeline going. Use automated pipelines, and I also want to get some experience with Kubernetes. Just haven't gotten to that yet. And then just step 6, profit. Step 7, UI UX work. Because I do not like working in Angular JavaScript. Here's some links that I chose to put in. So that's my GitHub. There's Fast API practices that I talked about. Fast API documentation is really helpful. Angular documentation is really helpful. And then this is where I went with all the buttons about Docker. And I got some of those example Docker files and best practices there. So thank you. If anybody have any questions or comments about my talk? Thank you.
Okay, then. You can store your keys. Where will you store them?
for my keys.
Yeah. That's right. A RITSEC lanyard.